Hello and welcome to this part of the course. In this particular part of the course, what we're going to be doing is to flesh a user interface that is conducive for creating the engine for which we will be able to effectively create Telegram posts that are automated. Creating a front-end framework that allows us to predictably utilize resources in order to generate a system whereby we do not have to always create the framework itself in order to parse a session of automation. This particular approach is advantageous in the long run, albeit it may be a little bit more time consuming to set up, but do take my word for the fact that in the long run, it is arguably a lot more better because you will then have the tools necessary in order to create your flow for automation without having to go back into the code and always write from scratch the framework. So without much further ado, let us get started. Welcome back. So in this particular part of the video, what I want to do is to walk through the user interface. Right now, we have a sort of modernish style flat UI user interface right here. It doesn't really matter what kind of style you opt for your own design. However, you can choose to use this as a kind of guide for your own, just to help with the tutorial, to keep things as smooth as possible. But one of the first things that the user interface has to actually accept is a bot token itself for the Telegram bot. Assuming you already have your bot token, which you do create on the Telegram side of things, this user interface presents you with three fields: bot token, bot temporary name, and the StripeLive token. As for the StripeLive token, that's something we're going to go in a little bit later in this series, how to add payments functionality so the bot can actually deal with currency, so that your Stripe account can get paid for perhaps your services or maybe for personal use. I'm going to enter my credentials off screen for obvious reasons. I'm going to go ahead and get some of the credentials, just entering it into the fields. And now the user interface has been updated. C#Sharp walkthroughs bot. Something along those lines. It's a little bit cropped because the title was quite long. So now the backend has the we've passed the bot token to the server itself via the field. So what we want to do is to actually flesh out our session. So I'm going to go and click on Tools, and there's a menu, a sub-menu called Configure Chat Trees. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And what appears is this chat canvas. In this particular window, I'm met with a few controls. I've got a button that says hi, an abbreviation of image, a currency symbol. This is to parse the script. This is to load the script from file, and this is to save the session. And then if you click home, you go back to the previous screen. So I'm just going to quickly demonstrate creating some flow with some nodes. So I'm going to go ahead and click this button. And what is generated is a node. Now this node accepts plain text in the chat content. I do appreciate it's a little bit hard to see. I will attempt to zoom in just to make things a little bit easier. Hopefully you should be able to see a little bit more clearly what's written on the screen in terms of the nodes. Now I'm going to go ahead and give this node a name, or rather, better said, the chat content of the node. So what will this node display on the Telegram chat automatically for the user? Hello, this is a bot message. Type OK to proceed. So now, also on the UI here, we have a field that's headed branch A tags and another field that's headed branch B tags. I'm going to go ahead and write OK in capitals here. And I'm going to write I'm going to leave the branch B blank actually. And we're going to kind of make sense of what's going on here as things progress, especially when we dive into the code. I'm going to go ahead and create another node. Here's my second node. And I'm going to say, well, I want to write a message. So I'm going to say, thanks, have a great day. And I'll write in brackets back. And then I'll write back on the branch A here. So what happens here is that each node has a unique ID. And if you take the node ID of one particular node and place it as a target node in another node, then what will happen is node A will target node B via its ID index. So I'm going to go ahead, target node ID A, branch A, is this particular node here, and you can see that by the user interface indicating that there's a connection. There's a target connection. And now, this connection will only be made if the user writes OK, as that's a tag here. And in a similar way, when the user writes back, we want to go back to the initial node text. So I'm going to go ahead. Whoops, I got the wrong node number. Just correct that. Here we go. So target node ID A now targets the initial node. So we have a little bit of a loop going on. The first node targets the second, and the second node targets the first. So if we're happy with this script, I'm going to go ahead and parse it. And the pop-up appears at the back, which I'm just going to click OK. I'm going to go back. And now I am going to click on upload, or rather update server. Server updated successfully. So now I'm just going to quickly pinch the screen. And now I'm going to take you to my Telegram client. I'm going to initiate a conversation with the bot. And as you can see, the respective message is displayed. I'm going to see if I can zoom in. Hopefully you should be able to read that a little bit better. So the message is, hello, this is a bot message, type OK to proceed. I'm going to go ahead and write OK. There is a little bit of a bug, which we can actually, this is a good opportunity to delve into some of the backend, but there is functionality. The correct message has popped up, thanks, have a great day, back. But there seems to be a little bit of an issue. It's double posting, and it's going back to the original message before we've even told it to. So this gives us a bit of grounds to dig our teeth into, and for lack of a better phrase, and we're gonna kind of explore not only how to set this kind of system, but how to improve it. Now, the thing is, the user interface, in my opinion, is actually almost as, if not just as important as the backend itself. Without a decent user interface, if you're planning to design any kind of project, product, anything that's going to get shipped, and it doesn't have at least a working UI, a UI that is conducive to the functionality of the backend and does it well, then you may as well not have a product, because then how are you going to interact reasonably with the backend? So we're going to take a little bit more time to focus on how to flesh out the user interface itself, whilst also looking at how to integrate the logic behind the data entry, also fundamental components of creating a Telegram bot manager application. Now, from the previous video, we went over a small demonstration of how the application works, and so now what we're going to do in this part of the course is that we're going to actually focus on how the data entry works, It's always important to flesh out a great user interface. So what we want to do in this particular part of the unit, we're going to be looking at how data entry works in order to get the information that we need to actually eventually parse the session for the Telegram automation. So without much further ado, let's get straight into this. So you might remember from the demo, what I first did was I clicked on link a new bot. And if we go over to the XAML design view, to the XAML script, we have a button here, and I've named it bot button 1, and its content is text called link a new bot. Now it also has an event hooked to it. I'll just quickly go to the event view. It's just simply bot button 1 click. And what this actually does, it simply constructs another window, the link bot window, and the link bot window takes as a parameter the instance of this particular main window class. And if we go to the class itself, let's go to the XAML. The link bot window is simply a XAML file which has a few fields: bot token, bot temporary name, and StripeLive token. Now the final field, StripeLive token, is somewhat optional. If within your application you intend to take Stripe payments from your customers, users, or for any personal benefit, then you're probably going to want a field to accept the your own StripeLive token, so that your Stripe account can receive payments in your chosen currency. This course will go into how to customize Stripe payments, so make sure you do stick around if that's a topic of interest for yourself. So this is just a simple window, nothing too fancy, but let's go ahead and look at what happens when we link a bot. I'm going to go ahead and click on the button. I'm going to click on the event that's hooked to it. And we have here some logic. Hopefully you can see just about on the screen. I'm going to just double check. I'll zoom in a little bit. So the logic is quite simple. Although not fully optimized, I will admit, it's kind of laid out in such a way that at least you'll be able to see what's going on. So the code is more readable, but it's not as optimized. But again, you'll be able to make out a little bit more clearer, should I say, what's actually going on in terms of the logic flow. So I have here the token field, which is the text box name, and I'm accessing the text. And just as a side note, you probably want to use a password box rather than a text box, just so that you can, just as with any data entry, when you're entering a password or any kind of sensitive information, it just obscures the text that you're writing in the screen in front of you. In any case, it's doing a check to see if the string is empty, and if the temporary name is empty, and if the StripeLive token field is empty. Or rather, better said, it's if it's not empty. So it's doing a string comparison. So in this if statement, it's evaluating whether all the fields, as we saw earlier, are not empty. So if there is information, string information entered into these fields, and all the fields have to be filled with string information, then we can proceed with our logic. Otherwise, if you're missing information, there will be an exception that is caught with a message box that says, please check that you have entered a valid bot token and a temporary bot name. We could also add StripeLive to that, and then it returns the function. Otherwise, if all the necessary criteria is met, if we input all the string information that we need, then I actually opted to create an instance, or rather to invoke this particular method, establish Telegram link, which we'll hop to in a second. And it takes as parameters the token field text and the StripeLive token. Now the thing is, I believe in this version, I'm not too sure, I'll double check really quickly. I should have a credentials. Okay, I do not have a credentials file. I think in another version of this application or a different project completely, I opted to have a credentials file. And this is a lot more secure because you can kind of keep the fields private or protected. But here I'm just pulling the data straight from the fields. So again, it will show you exactly what you want to do, but it gives you enough scope that you can establish your own level of any kind of encryption or security that you want. But of course, I have a class called tokens. Let's go straight to that. So this is what I was talking about. This particular class tokens actually holds the tokens that have been inputted on the field. And I actually thought I didn't have this, but it turns out I do. So basically, I have private fields. A very, very simple, um, should I say, way of protecting the information. It's probably the simplest way you can do it. Private fields exposed by public properties. And so all these properties are doing are exposed in the private fields and return their value or sets their values. So I'm just going to go back. And then I'm assigning the values of the tokens in the respective properties. And then I update the UI. It's always good to have some kind of user feedback so they know what's going on. Whether you're loading a page on a website or a video game stage is loading, there's always some kind of feedback usually that lets you know that something is happening, so that you can anticipate your game or your web page loading. In this case, I have here a reference to the bot button that was clicked that invokes the field window, and I'm basically changing its color, its background color, to this dark slate blue color, and the foreground color to white, and the name, or better said, the content of the button is then assigned the bot temporary name that we put on the field. This way we know that we have successfully linked our bot, or at least parsed the information into the server backend. And then of course I programmed the exit window button is this hide. It basically just hides the window. There's probably a better way to do this. I believe the best way to do it would be to actually destruct the window itself. Might go into that in a little bit, because we don't want a situation where we're creating multiple instances of the windows and then we might have clash of user data. In fact, there might be a more suitable function in here. Let's have a quick look. If we say something like, I don't want to go into the application. So we could just go for this.close. I think that's a little bit better. This.hide only just hides the window, but I think this is a little bit more safe. And also, we enable the window to be draggable. And now you may be thinking, why did I do this? Why did I manually allow the window to be draggable in order to move the window around the screen? Well, if we go back to the XAML, you'll probably notice a kind of a theme of the windows I created. There's some like kind of borderless. There are no borders, typical borders you find in a Windows application, but rather they are borderless. I think there's a little bit of curvature as well on the corners for a little bit of style. This button is a little bit longer than it needs to be, but that doesn't matter too much. And I have a button that actually closes the window that is not the typical X button. It's a manual one that I made. Now, this was done for style purposes, but it doesn't really matter. You can stick to the original handle, like Windows border handles that are available. However, here I opted to just make the entire window draggable via an event, just so that you can still move the window without the need of dragging the top part of it as you do with a typical Windows application. So now we've established this, let's go back to the main window. In fact, maybe we'll hop to the, I would say we can actually go to the next phase of what would happen in the flow. So what then tends to happen, once you've linked your bot, the next go-to would be to go and enter the tools menu. And when you enter the tools menu, you may remember that there were two options, one of which were the chat canvas. Or rather, to configure chat trees, which then pops up the chat canvas. When this is clicked, if I just go ahead and expose the event, just go ahead and here it is, came up, menu item underscore click. It hides the current window and it shows the chat canvas that's already been instantiated. Probably at constructor level, if just off the top of my head. Now, we won't dive too much into what this is doing right now, but just to explain, if you do create a chat session with various nodes, and you opt to go back to the manager, or should I say the hub screen, i.e. the main window class, and then you go back to the chat canvas, you need a way to show all the nodes that were on the screen before because they were hidden before. And this is what this does. So we may revisit this logic just to make sense of things as and when. But for now, so as to not break the flow of what we're going through, we're going to go ahead and go to this class, the chat canvas. And let's have a look at its XAML. So the chat canvas is quite simple. It allows the user to design the flow of the automated chat conversations with the bot. And I opted to create a node style scripting window kind of approach, whereby you generate nodes by clicking the node button. In this case, it's the one at the top. And once you click it, we'll go ahead and actually observe what's in the click event. There is a dispatcher timer. And the dispatcher timer, if we actually go to its declaration / instantiation, I want to go ahead and find out what it's actually updating. It updates this function called update. And within the update function, there's various logic that pertains to the chat canvas itself, of which we'll have to break down as we go ahead. But we're doing this step by step for now. So anyway, when you create a new node, it stops the clock, the update loop, and this avoids desynchronization issues with the user interface. It should make sense a little bit later down the course, and we create a new node. We construct this new node class, which is a class that I created. Let's go ahead and have a look at it. Now the node class is simply a window as such. I'm going to show you the XAML of the node class. Yet another window is what is created, and I went ahead and created some fields for it. So this particular window, it has a number of fields, some of which are modifiable directly, some of which are not. The main ones to note is the node ID, which displays a unique hash-based identification string for the node itself. There's this index of the node, index at root, the root node being at 0. And there's the chat content, what you want the bot to say at a particular time of the flow. So if we go back to the main CSharp file for this XAML file, excuse me. We construct the node canvas by passing first a chat canvas instance. And this will just allow us to access the necessary members of the chat canvas that we may need for any parsing of logic within this node class. And now node field ID.text, which is one of the fields that displays the node ID, the unique hash, calls a function, the get hash code function, which is inbuilt, and it's getting the get hash code from the window handle. So it's getting it from the actual window itself. So each node window is unique in the sense of its instantiation, and thus it should generate a unique hash identification string. And we're going to use this to uniquely identify the node itself. I'm going to go ahead and go back. And we just cast it to a toString, and we store its value, the unique string identification hash, onto the field. So it's displayable. You'll be able to see it on the screen. And we also store its value in a property, a public property that exposes a private field, which is always good practice to do. And now this is just a little touch in terms of aesthetic. I have a bitmap graphic, and this bitmap graphic is a little bot kind of animation, and I'm just loading it into memory. I won't go too much into this as it's very, very optional. You want to instantiate a dispatcher timer object. I'll just quickly show you how that looks again. Automation clock. And now this clock runs on the node file, and it just deals with the animation of the bitmap graphics. There's a very subtle animation for the sprites, and that's what the animation dispatcher timer deals with, running at 60 frames target, 60 frames per second. Now, I could say more importantly, we have this. We have two properties, which are actually lists of string. So these properties are called keywords leading to branch A, keywords leading to branch B respectively, and we instantiate them. And what these collections hold is all the keywords that we write that the program is going to be looking out for in order to trigger the next stage of flow. For example, if your bot is programmed to say the words "Hello world, how is your day?" and you as a user say "My day is fine," what will happen in the backend, which will eventually break down once we get to that part of the video of the course, is that word by word there will be a string comparison checking each word that is written by the user, and if you find a keyword that's listed in either of these lists, it will take you to the respective branch, the A route or the B route of the conversation flow. This just updates the reference to the chat canvas. We have the past parameter chat canvas, which is then stored in global scope, and then we display the XAML. We display the actual visual. This is all done at constructor level. We'll gloss over the animation update as it's very optional. Some logic pertaining to the animation. And now all this property is doing is it's just returning the value of the private fields and setting the value. So nothing too outrageously special there. Chat content does something somewhat the same. The content that's written on the node pertaining to what you want the bot to say is accessed via its public property. And the same for the node ID and all these other properties here. So we're going to go into the logic behind what is actually going on in terms of parsing the flow itself. But that will come in the next part of basically the next video, which will be the next part of the unit or the next unit itself. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the main window for now. As right now, we're just basically studying how to create the, we're just kind of observing the data entry in terms of the XAML. I'm going to go back to the chat canvas actually. And that covers it for the node. So far, we've covered some of the basics regarding the user interface regarding the Telegram Bot Manager project. Again, I do stress that it's always important to have the backbone of a good user interface in order to even help you visualize the code base that you want to actually create. As at the end of the day, you are going to be relying on a user interface in order to pass data entry. So now that that part of the course has been covered, very briefly, very lightly, we've glossed over the XAML. I didn't want to go too much into detail into how to construct the XAML itself, as I want to gear more focus into the next part of the video. And in the next part of the video, what we're going to be looking at is the actual logic that pertains to actually setting up the flow itself. So we're going to really get into the meat and potatoes of what this project actually does, bar the network server functionality, which even in another video on the YouTube channel, I lightly covered that sort of functionality, but we're going to deep dive into that in this particular course. So do stick around for the next video. We're going to be covering how to actually parse the flow for a session of Telegram automation. Don't miss it. See you next time.